Resident Evil 9 DLC is currently in development, but we still don't know what the DLC is going to be about. Will it focus on Leon Kennedy, or will it continue Grace's story? Could it feature Ada Wong or Chris Redfield? According to reports, Capcom has decided to release the DLC after the Code Veronica remake, which means we won't be getting the DLC this year. We will have to wait until Code Veronica releases first. So today we will cover every leak and insider report about the Resident Evil 9 DLC. And according to recent rumors and insider information, Capcom might actually be planning 2 separate DLC expansions for Resident Evil 9. Yes, not just one, 2 DLCs. Now, the first DLC is rumored to be completely focused on Leon S. Kennedy. Insider Dusk Golem mentioned that launch content was being considered for the game. If you look at Capcom's history with the Resident Evil franchise, this idea becomes even more believable. After Resident Evil 6, almost every major Resident Evil title has received some kind of DLC expansion. For example, Resident Evil 7 had multiple story DLCs like Not a Hero and End of Zoe. Then Resident Evil Village got the Shadows of Rose expansion. Even the remakes received additional content. So based on that pattern alone, it would be very surprising if Resident Evil 9 didn't get any DLC at all. That's why many fans believe it's basically guaranteed that we will see some kind of expansion sooner or later. Now, this leak supposedly comes from a Japanese insider who claims to have information about Capcom's full DLC roadmap for Resident Evil 9. And according to this report, the upcoming Requiem DLC is reportedly called Extraction, and it will feature Chris Redfield and Ada Wong as the 2 main playable protagonists. That alone already sounds massive. But apparently, that's not even the biggest part of the leak. According to the same source, Resident Evil 9 is actually planned to receive 2 separate story expansions in total. One DLC would reportedly focus on Alyssa and Leon Kennedy, while the second expansion would center around Chris Redfield and Ada Wong. So basically, Capcom could be preparing 2 major post-launch story DLCs instead of just one. Now honestly, that sounds almost too good to be true, and because of that, a lot of fans immediately started questioning whether this leak was actually legit. That's where well-known Resident Evil insider Dusk Golem entered the conversation. Someone directly asked him about the rumored Extraction DLC featuring Chris and Ada, and his response was extremely blunt. He called it BS, literally just that. Afterward, Dusk Golem clarified his thoughts a little more and explained that while he does believe Ada Wong will eventually appear in future DLC content, he doesn't think this specific rumor about the Extraction expansion is accurate. So, according to him, the leak itself is probably fake or at least partially incorrect. But interestingly enough, he also shared his own expectations for Capcom's timeline moving forward, and honestly, it sounds pretty believable. According to Dusk Golem, the free Requiem content update is still expected to release very soon, possibly this month. We still don't know exactly what's included in that update, but recent developer interviews may have quietly hinted at something important. Apparently, Resident Evil producers told Japanese players to finish the game during Golden Week, which many fans believe was Capcom subtly teasing that new content is right around the corner. Let's talk about what this first DLC could actually be about. And before I continue, minor spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't finished the game yet. At the end of Resident Evil 9, we see a mysterious character named Alpha, who delivers a message specifically for Leon. And the interesting part is that this message actually comes from Chris Redfield. Now, what makes this situation so intriguing is that Chris is involved in the events of Resident Evil 9, but he isn't directly present throughout most of the story. Instead, it feels like he's pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Leon himself doesn't fully know where Chris is or what he's planning, so this could be the perfect setup for a DLC storyline. Imagine a scenario where the DLC follows Leon as he tries to track down Chris, uncover what he's been investigating, and understand the bigger threat that's starting to emerge. But that's not the only mystery the DLC could explore. We also have the introduction of Zeno, who is rumored to be a clone of Albert Wesker. And if that turns out to be true, it could have huge implications for the future of the franchise. Albert Wesker has always been one of the most iconic villains in Resident Evil history, so the idea of a clone or successor carrying on his legacy could open the door for a much larger storyline. This is why many fans believe the first DLC would focus heavily on Leon and Chris working together, possibly investigating this new Wesker-related threat. But things might not stop there, because the rumors suggest that a second DLC could also be in development, and this second expansion might be even more important. According to speculation, the second DLC could focus directly on Albert Wesker, or at least the legacy surrounding him. Instead of just being a side story, this DLC might actually start setting up the events for Resident Evil 10. If that's the case, it could act as a bridge between the 2 games, similar to how some previous Resident Evil expansions expanded the larger narrative. And if Resident Evil 10 truly focuses on the Wesker storyline, there's a very good chance that Chris Redfield could become the main protagonist again. Because when it comes to Wesker, Chris has always been the character most connected to that conflict. Leon, on the other hand, might not want to continue dealing with these global terror threats forever. After everything he's been through over the years, it wouldn't be surprising if Capcom eventually gave him a smaller role moving forward. But there is another character we still haven't talked about. and that's Ada Wong. Right now, we still don't know what Ada is doing during the events of Resident Evil 9. She has always been a mysterious character who appears at key moments in the story, often working in the shadows with her own agenda. So it's very possible that one of these DLCs could reveal Ada's involvement or show what she has been doing behind the scenes. In fact, it wouldn't be surprising if Ada somehow had a connection to the new Wesker clone storyline. After all, she has always been linked to secret organizations via weapons and covert missions. So bringing her back into the story could make the DLC even more exciting. But personally, I do think there's a very good chance we see Ada Wong in the DLC eventually. It honestly feels like Capcom has been building toward that for a while now. Ada is one of the most iconic characters in the entire franchise, and there are still so many unanswered questions surrounding her story, especially when it comes to Leon. Because fans have been speculating for years about Ada and Leon's relationship, and whether Capcom will ever fully explore what happened between them after all these years. And if Ada really does appear in the DLC, this could finally be the opportunity to dive deeper into that storyline. Now, as for Chris Redfield, I'm honestly not completely convinced. I feel like Capcom might actually be saving Chris for Resident Evil 10 instead, especially because Resident Evil 10 is rumored to be a massive crossover style game that could potentially bring together multiple legacy characters for one final story. And if that ends up being true, Chris would obviously play a major role there. As for Leon Kennedy, there's also a possibility that Resident Evil 9 or Resident Evil 10 could start setting up the end of his journey as a main protagonist. I mean, Leon has been carrying this franchise for decades at this point. From Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 4 and beyond, he's basically become the face of the series alongside Chris. But timeline-wise, Leon is getting older now. And honestly, Capcom may eventually want to give his character a more emotional conclusion instead of just throwing him into endless outbreaks forever. Maybe they finally let him settle down. Maybe they finally explore his personal life more seriously. Or maybe Capcom gives him one final legendary mission before passing the torch to a new generation of characters. At this point, anything feels possible. But overall, whether these leaks are real or fake, one thing is clear: Capcom definitely has huge plans for Resident Evil moving forward. Between the rumored DLC, the possible Code Veronica remake, and whatever Resident Evil 10 eventually becomes, the future of this franchise looks absolutely packed. But anyway, guys, those are just my thoughts on everything so far. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think these Resident Evil 9 DLC leaks are real? Would you want to play as Ada Wong and Chris Redfield again? And do you think Capcom is setting up Leon Kennedy's final story? Subscribe for more Resident Evil news and updates, and I'll see you guys in the next video.